The first time my stepmother asked me for rent, I thought she was joking. "You're 18 now, Marcus," she said, folding her arms across her chest as she leaned against the kitchen counter. "Adults contribute." I stared at her, waiting for a smile that never came. Contribute. This was my house. Well, technically, it had been my mother's house before she passed away. Before cancer shrank her into someone I barely recognized. Before my dad remarried 6 months later. The house on Maple Drive in Columbus, Ohio wasn't just wood and drywall. It was Saturday morning pancakes. It was my mom's lavender perfume in the hallway. It was Christmas lights she never took down until February. And now, according to my stepmother Renee, it was a rental property. "For my room?" Asked slowly. "Yes. Utilities aren't free. Food isn't free. You're working now." I worked part-time at a grocery store after school. I was saving for community college. Or at least I had been. Dad sat at the kitchen table, staring into his coffee like the answers might float to the top. He didn't look at me. "That's fair, son," he muttered. Fair. The word echoed in my ears like an insult. Renee moved into our lives like a storm disguised as sunshine. At first, she brought casseroles and soft smiles. She told me she'd never try to replace my mom. She said she just wanted to bring stability back into our lives. Stability turned into control. My mom's pictures slowly disappeared from the walls. "We need a fresh start," Renee had said. The living room was repainted gray. The floral curtains were replaced with something beige and lifeless. My mom's piano was sold because it took up space. I didn't fight it. I didn't have the energy. But charging me rent, that felt like erasing me too. 2 days later, Renee slid a piece of paper across the kitchen table. A printed agreement. "Room rental agreement," it said at the top. $300 a month. Due on the 1st. Late fees applied after 5 days. I laughed, actually laughed because it felt unreal. "You're serious?" "Yes." "Completely." Dad cleared his throat. "It'll teach responsibility." I wanted to scream. Instead I signed it. Not because I agreed. 'Cause I understood something in that moment. I wasn't family anymore. I was a tenant, working to stay. Every paycheck from the grocery store now had a destination. Rent, utilities, household contribution. Renee even started labeling food in the refrigerator. Family food. Marcus. My section got smaller each week. If I drank juice from the wrong carton, she'd tap the contract pinned to the fridge. Tenants don't get privileges. Tenants. The word followed me everywhere. At school, my friends talked about dorm rooms and scholarships. About moving out for freedom. I was paying to stay trapped. The worst part wasn't Renee. It was Dad. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't loud. He just disappeared. If Renee criticized me, he stayed quiet. If she raised the rent to $350, because utilities increased, he nodded. I tried once. "Dad, Mom wouldn't have done this." His jaw tightened. "Your mom isn't here, Marcus." That sentence cut deeper than anything Renee had ever said. One rainy Saturday, while cleaning the garage to earn my keep, I found a metal lockbox buried under old paint cans. Inside were documents, a house deed, my mother's name, mine. I blinked. I read it again. Joint ownership, survivorship clause. My mom had added my name to the property a year before she died. Which meant I wasn't just living there. Half the house legally belonged to me. My hands shook. Had Dad known? Had Renee? Suddenly the contract on the fridge felt like a bad joke. That evening I placed the deed on the kitchen table. Renee froze. Dad went pale. "Where did you get that?" he asked. "Garage," I replied calmly. "Under old paint cans. Funny place for something so important." Renee recovered quickly. "That doesn't mean anything. You're still living under our roof." "Our roof," I said, meeting her eyes. "It's my roof too." Silence swallowed the room. Dad rubbed his forehead. "She added you because she was sick," he said quietly. "She was scared. She trusted me, I replied. She trusted that I'd always have a home. Renee scoffed. You're not mature enough to handle ownership. I slid the rental contract toward her. But mature enough to be charged rent. The atmosphere in the house changed overnight. Renee stopped calling me tenant. But she didn't apologize either. Instead, she avoided me. Dad tried to smooth things over. We can figure something out, he said. Maybe reduce the rent. I'm not paying rent in a house I co-own, I said firmly. He looked tired. For the first time, I saw not a villain, but a weak man afraid of conflict. I don't want to fight, he whispered. Then don't, I replied. I met with a legal aid office downtown the following week. The lawyer confirmed it. I was legally co-owner. If pushed, I could force a sale. Or demand formal recognition of my rights. I didn't want to destroy my family. But I also wasn't going to be erased. When I returned home that evening, Renee was sitting in the living room. Let's talk, she said. For the first time, her voice lacked sharpness. She looked worried. I may have been hard on you, she admitted. But I was trying to keep structure. Structure isn't charging someone to exist, I said. She sighed. I didn't expect the deed. Honesty. At last. Over the next hour, the truth surfaced. After marrying Dad, Renee had discovered large medical debts from my mom's treatment. The house was the only real asset. She'd hoped to slowly prepare me to move out so they could refinance or eventually sell without resistance. Charging rent wasn't about utilities. It was about pushing me out. The betrayal stung, but it also made sense. Fear makes people cruel. I could have fought, forced the sale, taken my half and left. Instead, I made a different choice. No more rent, I said. We split utilities fairly. No hidden plans. No erasing Mom. Renee nodded slowly. Dad exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for months. The pictures of my mom returned to the hallway the next day. Not all of them, but enough. Kept working. Not to pay rent, but to save for my future. And when I eventually moved out 2 years later for college, it wasn't because I'd been pushed. It was because I was ready. On my last night in the house on Maple Drive, I stood in my old bedroom and looked around. I had paid rent in my own home. But I had also learned something more valuable. Ownership isn't just about property. It's about knowing your worth. And refusing to let anyone charge you for it. The tension didn't disappear after the night of the confrontation. Just changed shape. The air inside the house on Maple Drive felt heavier, like it was waiting for something to break. Renee stopped asking me for money, but she didn't start treating me like a co-owner either. I wasn't a tenant anymore. I was a problem she hadn't planned for. Dad tried harder those first few weeks. He invited me to sit with him in the living room. He asked about school. He even suggested we grab burgers downtown like we used to when Mom was alive. But every conversation felt fragile, like we were standing on glass. 2 months later, the letter came. Certified mail. I was home alone when I signed for it. It was addressed to my dad, but the return address made my stomach drop. Law firm. I didn't open it. I shouldn't have. But I knew before Dad even got home that something wasn't right. That evening, I handed him the envelope. His hands shook slightly as he opened it. Renee hovered close. Silence stretched as his eyes moved across the page. What is it? Yes. He swallowed. They're threatening foreclosure. The word felt like someone kicked the floor out from under me. But we're paying the mortgage, I said. Dad looked at Renee. Renee looked at the wall. Then Dad spoke quietly. We refinanced last year. My chest tightened. Without telling me. Renee crossed her arms. You were still a kid. I was on the deed, I snapped. They hadn't just refinanced. They had taken out a home equity loan. Big one. And because I was co-owner, my name was tied to the property, even if I hadn't signed the paperwork. That's illegal, I said. Dad looked ashamed. We were drowning in debt, he whispered. Medical bills. Credit cards. I thought I could fix it before you noticed. Before I noticed. Like I was just passing through. I met with the legal aid attorney again downtown. This time I wasn't just nervous. I was angry. The lawyer reviewed the documents carefully. They can't legally refinance without your consent if you're a recorded co-owner, she said. If your signature was forged, that's serious. Forged. The word echoed like thunder. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to imagine my father signing my name on official documents. But the paperwork didn't lie. The signature wasn't mine. That night, I laid the documents on the dining table. No yelling. No dramatics. Just facts. Did you sign my name? Dad didn't answer immediately. Renee did. It was necessary. My heart pounded. Necessary. Dad finally spoke. I did it. The room felt smaller. I was trying to save the house, he said desperately. If we defaulted on the medical debt, they would have taken everything. So you committed fraud. My voice cracked. Silence. Dad's shoulders slumped. I didn't think you'd ever find out. That hurt more than the forgery. I have two options, I said calmly, though my hands were shaking. I can report this. Or we fix it. Renee's eyes flashed. You'd turn your own father in. I didn't forge anything, I replied. Dad looked at me with something between fear and regret. What does fix it mean, he asked. It means transparency. Means I see every financial statement. Means we talk to the bank together. And it means no more secrets. Renee opened her mouth to argue, but Dad stopped her. Okay, he said. Just one word. But it changed everything. A week later, the three of us sat inside a cold gray office at a local branch of Chase. The loan officer looked uncomfortable as the legal questions unfolded. When it became clear that my signature had been falsified, the tone shifted quickly. No one wanted a fraud investigation, especially not a bank. After tense negotiations, and with the help of a community mediation program, the terms were restructured. Higher monthly payments, longer timeline, but no immediate foreclosure. And most importantly, no criminal charges. Dad walked out of the building looking 10 years older. Later that night, I found Renee sitting alone in the kitchen. For once, she didn't look defensive. She looked tired. You think I hate you, she said quietly. I think you wanted me gone, I replied. She nodded slightly. I was scared, she admitted. You were a reminder of a life I didn't fit into. Your mom built everything here. I always felt like a guest. That surprised me. I thought if you moved out, she continued, we could start fresh. No ghosts. You can't erase people just because they make you uncomfortable, I said. She gave a small, sad smile. I know that now. We created something different after that. Not perfect, but honest. I didn't pay rent. Instead, I contributed directly to utilities by choice. Not obligation. Dad handed me access to the online mortgage account. We held monthly financial meetings at the kitchen table. Felt awkward at first. But slowly, the house began to feel less like a battlefield. I applied to Ohio State University the following year. When the acceptance letter arrived, I didn't feel like I was escaping. I felt like I was advancing. Dad hugged me tightly. I'm proud of you, he said. And for the first time in a long time I believed him. Renee surprised me too. She handed me a small box before I left. Inside was my mom's old house key. I found it when we were reorganizing, she said softly. This will always be your home. Not a rental. Not a contract. Moving into my dorm didn't erase the past. But it gave me perspective. I had paid rent in my own home. Discovered hidden debt. Faced forgery. Negotiated with banks. And protected what my mother left behind. Most 18-year-olds were learning how to do laundry. I was learning how to stand up for myself. Halfway through my first semester, my phone rang. It was Dad. His voice sounded shaken. Marcus, we need you to come home this weekend. My stomach dropped. What happened? It's about the house. And the way he said it. I knew this story wasn't over. The drive from Columbus back to Maple Drive felt longer than usual. Dad wouldn't tell me what happened over the phone. Just kept repeating, "It's serious." Serious had become a pattern in our family. When I pulled into the driveway that Saturday morning, I noticed the first sign. A red sticker on the front door. My chest tightened. It wasn't a foreclosure notice. It was a code violation warning from the city. I exhaled slightly, but not fully. Inside, the house felt different. Renee was pacing. Dad looked exhausted. "What's going on?" I asked. Dad handed me a letter from the city inspector's office. Complaint filed. Unsafe electrical wiring. Structural damage in the basement. Mandatory inspection scheduled. My stomach dropped. "The basement," said. "What's wrong with the basement?" Renee hesitated. Dad answered. "When we refinanced, we used part of the loan to renovate. The contractor was cheap." That word again. I walked downstairs slowly. The smell hit first, burnt insulation. The walls that were supposed to be reinforced looked uneven. Some wiring was exposed. One beam had a visible crack running through it. "This isn't just cosmetic," I said. Dad nodded. "The contractor disappeared after we paid him." "Of course he did. Did you check his license?" Silence. I ran a hand over my face. One disaster avoided. Another waiting underneath the floorboards. The inspector arrived Monday morning. I stayed an extra day before going back to campus. He moved carefully through the house, making notes, taking pictures. When he came upstairs, his expression was grim. "You've got serious electrical violations. And that basement beam. It's compromised." "How bad?" Dad asked quietly. "If it fails, the rear section of the house could partially collapse." The word collapse echoed in my ears. My mom's kitchen. My childhood bedroom. All of it resting on a bad decision. "You'll need immediate repairs," the inspector continued. "And permits this time." Permits. Licensed contractors. Money. Money we didn't have. Dad called the homeowner's insurance company that afternoon. Claim denied. The renovation had been done without permits. That voided coverage for structural damage. Renee sat at the table, staring at nothing. "We can't afford this," she whispered. I looked at the house around me. For months, I had fought to protect it legally. Now it was physically falling apart. 2 days later, a black SUV parked outside. A man in a tailored coat stepped out. He knocked confidently. "Good afternoon," he said with a polished smile. "I represent a real estate investment group. We're interested in purchasing properties in this neighborhood." Course they were. Maple Drive had been rising in value. "We're not selling," Dad said immediately. The man glanced at the red violation sticker still half peeled from the door. "With respect, sir," he replied smoothly. "Houses with structural damage can lose value quickly. We'd offer a cash purchase. Quick close." Predator. That's what he was. He knew. Someone from the city likely tipped investors off about code violations. "How much?" Renee asked before she could stop herself. The number he said was low. Insultingly low. But high enough to tempt someone drowning. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about everything that had happened. Rent in my own home. Forgery. Now structural failure. It would be easier to sell. Walk away. Split the money. Start over. But every time I imagined strangers tearing the house down to build luxury townhomes, something inside me resisted. This house wasn't just wood and nails. It was my mother's last gift. And I wasn't ready to surrender it to a man in a tailored coat. I went back to campus with a mission. Instead of just focusing on classes, I started researching. Construction law. Home renovation permits. Fraudulent contractors. And something else. Grants. The City of Columbus had a home repair assistance program for owner-occupied properties with safety hazards. Low-interest loans. Sometimes partial forgiveness. But there was a catch. The primary resident had to meet certain income guidelines. Dad's income was borderline too high. Mine, however, as co-owner and legal resident, qualified. I drove home the following weekend with printed paperwork. We're not selling, I said firmly, placing the application forms on the table. Renee looked skeptical. Dad looked tired. There's a program, I explained. If we apply under my ownership portion, we can get help repairing the structural issues legally. Dad studied the papers. You'd take on that responsibility? He asked quietly. I already have, I replied. Renee folded her arms, but not defensively this time. You'd do that after everything, she asked. I looked at her. I'm not protecting the house for you, I said honestly. I'm protecting it for Mom. And for me. That seemed to land differently. Weeks passed. Inspections. Paperwork. Financial disclosures. Finally, approval. Partial funding granted for structural beam replacement and electrical rewiring, if done by licensed contractors. For the first time in months, hope didn't feel fragile. It felt earned. One evening, while contractors measured the basement, Dad stood beside me in the kitchen. You shouldn't have had to grow up this fast, he said quietly. I shrugged slightly. Someone had to. He nodded. I failed you, he admitted. The words were simple, but they mattered. I'm still here, I replied. And for once that felt like truth, not obligation. A week later the black SUV came back. The same tailored coat. The same smooth smile. I heard repairs are underway, he said casually. We're not interested, I replied before Dad could speak. He looked at me carefully. You must be Marcus. Froze. How do you know my name? He smiled slightly wider. We research ownership records. My heart started pounding. You're young to be handling property disputes, he added. Disputes. What did he know? Then he said something that made the air shift. There's a lien attached to this property you might not be aware of. Silence. Dad looked confused. Renee went pale. What lien? Asked carefully. The investor adjusted his coat. A private medical collection lien from several years ago. It hasn't been enforced. Yet. My stomach dropped. Medical bills. My mom's treatment. This house had more ghosts than I thought. The word lien followed me into my sleep that night. I stayed home instead of returning to campus. Classes felt small compared to what was happening on Maple Drive. The next morning I went straight to the county recorder's office website. And there it was. Filed 3 years ago. A medical collection lien. Attached to the property. Amount owed. $87,432. My hands went cold. That's from Mom's treatment, Dad said quietly when I showed him. But I thought insurance covered most of it. It covered some, he replied. Not all. Renee didn't speak. She just stared at the number like it might shrink if she looked at it long enough. When were you planning to mention this? Yes. Dad ran a hand through his thinning hair. It was dormant. They hadn't acted on it. That doesn't mean it disappears. Renee finally spoke. We were trying to manage it quietly. Quietly. Like everything else. Refinance quietly. Forgery quietly. Renovate quietly. Now a lien quietly. Silence had nearly cost us the house more than once. I called the legal aid attorney again. Her voice was steady as she explained it. A lien means they have a legal claim against the property. If you sell, they get paid from the proceeds. If you default in certain conditions, they can push for enforcement. Can they force a sale? Yes. Possibly, but usually they wait. It depends on the creditor. Who is it? I pause. It's been transferred to a private collection firm. My jaw tightened. The investor. Click. They're circling, I muttered. 2 days later I requested a meeting. If someone was trying to pressure us, I wanted to see their face across a table. The office was downtown. Glass walls. Clean carpets. Polished smiles. The man from the SUV sat across from me again. You're persistent, he said. You're predatory, I replied calmly. He smiled faintly. Business isn't personal. It is when it's your childhood home. He folded his hands. The lien is valid. The debt exists. We simply acquired it. How much did you buy it for? Asked. He didn't answer. That was answer enough. Collection agencies buy debt for pennies on the dollar. Then squeeze. You want the house, I said. He leaned back slightly. We want resolution. By forcing a sale. By encouraging practicality. Then he said something that chilled me. If you sell to our investment group, we can settle the lien internally. Clean transaction. No stress. In other words, sell cheap. They wipe the debt they bought cheaply. Flip the house later for profit. Understood. We're not selling. His expression hardened for the first time. You're young, he said quietly. You don't understand how pressure works. I met his gaze. You don't understand how attachment works. Back home, tension exploded. We can't fight corporations, Renee said sharply. We're barely staying afloat. Dad looked torn. If they push enforcement, we could lose everything, he admitted. So we just surrender. Shot back. No, Renee said, voice shaking. We survive. That word hung between us. Survival had guided every bad decision so far. Fear-based survival. I wasn't interested in surviving anymore. I wanted control. I spent nights buried in financial forums, property law websites, and debt negotiation strategies. Here's what I learned. Medical debt often settles for far less than face value. Liens can sometimes be negotiated. If the debt buyer violated any notification rules, the lien could be challenged. And then I found something else. Discrepancy. The original hospital billing statement listed a different amount than the lien filing. The lien amount was inflated with added fees. Large fees. Potentially illegal ones. My heart started racing. I drove to the hospital's billing department. After hours of paperwork and persistence, I got copies of the original statements. The original unpaid balance was $52,000. Not $87,432. Someone had stacked fees aggressively. Interest, collection costs, legal filing charges, predatory math. That night, I sat with Dad at the kitchen table. This isn't just debt, I said quietly. It's leverage. Dad looked defeated. I'm tired, Marcus. I know. I thought I was protecting you. You were protecting yourself from conflict. That hit. He didn't deny it. We fight smart, I continued. Not emotional. We request validation of the debt. Full breakdown. If they can't justify it, we challenge it. Renee looked skeptical but hopeful. And if they can, she asked. Then we negotiate hard. I drafted a formal debt validation request. Certified mail. Demanding itemized breakdown. Proof of authority. Transfer documentation. I wasn't bluffing anymore. I was learning. Weeks passed. Contractors repaired the basement beam. Electrical wiring was replaced properly. The house slowly became safer. Stronger. Like us. Then the response letter arrived. Thick envelope. Corporate logo. Inside was the breakdown. And buried in it. Mistake. They had miscalculated interest based on the wrong accrual date. It reduced the enforceable amount significantly. My hands trembled. This wasn't over. But for the first time, they weren't the only ones applying pressure. The investor called me directly. No SUV. No polished office. Just a phone call. You've done your homework, he said. I'm just getting started. He was quiet for a moment. Let's discuss settlement. Not surrender. Settlement. That word felt different. The house is no longer just under threat. Now it's a battlefield of leverage, intelligence, and endurance. The word settlement echoed in my head long after I hung up the phone. Not surrender. Settlement. That meant they were willing to move. And if they were willing to move, it meant they weren't as confident as they pretended to be. We met in a neutral place this time. A small conference room at a mediation center downtown. No glass towers. No tailored intimidation. Just a folding table and paperwork. The investor, Mr. Holbrook, sat across from me again. We're prepared to reduce the lien to $60,000, he said smoothly. I didn't react. He slid the paper toward me like it was generous. It avoids litigation, avoids stress, quick resolution. Leaned back. You bought this debt for less than half of that, I said calmly. A flicker in his eyes. So I was right. You're speculating, he replied. I'm calculating. Silence filled the room. Then I spoke clearly. Original balance was $52,000. Your interest calculation error drops enforceable amount further. You also added collection fees before proper validation notice. He didn't interrupt. You don't want court, I continued. Because discovery would expose the purchase amount. That landed. $25,000, I said. Renee inhaled sharply beside me. Dad stared at me like he didn't recognize his own son. Holbrook laughed lightly. That's unrealistic. Then we'll see you in court. His smile faded. Litigation costs money. Time investors hate. The mediator stepped in. Back and forth. Offers raised. Numbers lowered. Eventually we stepped outside for a break. Dad grabbed my arm. Marcus, are you sure about this? What if they enforce the lien? They won't, I said quietly. How do you know? Because if they thought they'd win cleanly, they wouldn't be negotiating. Renee looked at me differently now. Not as a problem. Not as a tenant. But as an equal. 2 hours later we had it. $32,000. Paid in structured installments over 18 months. Lien released upon completion. No forced sale. No foreclosure action. It wasn't cheap. But it was survivable. And it was far from $87,000. When Holbrook signed the agreement, he looked at me carefully. You have potential, he said. You'd do well in business. I met his gaze. I already am. Relief didn't feel loud. Felt quiet. Like breathing normally after months of holding your breath. But reality remained. We now had mortgage payments, repair loan installments, settlement payments. The house was saved. But barely. That night, Dad sat at the kitchen table long after Renee went to bed. I was wrong, he said softly. About what? About you. About thinking you were just a kid. I didn't answer immediately. I didn't want responsibility, he continued. I thought I could fix everything alone. And instead, I said gently, you almost lost everything alone. He nodded. I'm proud of you. And ashamed of myself. That was the first honest thing he'd said in years. And it mattered more than any settlement. I returned to campus with something different inside me. Clarity. Changed my major. From undecided business basics to finance and real estate law. If the world worked like this, I wanted to understand it fully. Not just defend against it. Control it. One weekend when I came home, Renee handed me an envelope. Inside was a check. $2,000. My savings, she said. For the settlement fund. You don't have to. Yes, I do, she interrupted gently. I've been trying to control things since I came here. Maybe it's time I contribute instead. No sharp tone. No defensiveness. Just honesty. I nodded slowly. Thank you. It wasn't dramatic. But it was real. The basement repairs were complete. The wiring was safe. The lien was negotiated. The house stood steady again. For the first time in years, Maple Drive felt like a home, not a battlefield. But something had shifted inside me permanently. I wasn't the kid paying rent anymore. I was an owner, negotiator, protector. 3 months into the settlement payments, another letter arrived. Not from the collection firm. Not from the bank. From an estate attorney in Chicago. Addressed to me. Only me. I opened it slowly. Began. You are listed as a beneficiary in the estate of Eleanor Whitmore. I frowned. I didn't know anyone by that name. Then the next line made my heart stop. Ms. Whitmore was your mother's biological aunt. I stared at the page. My mother had never mentioned her. The letter continued. You are entitled to a percentage of the estate, pending probate completion. My hands trembled. After everything. After debt. After fraud. After near foreclosure. Now this. I looked around the living room. At the repaired walls. At the hallway where my mom's pictures hung again. And I whispered to myself. This story isn't done. I read the letter 3 times before I told anyone. Eleanor Whitmore. Chicago. Estate. Beneficiary. It felt unreal, like one of those fake lottery scams that show up in spam folders. But this wasn't spam. It had a real law firm letterhead. Probate case number. Direct phone line. And my full legal name spelled correctly. That detail alone told me this was serious. I stepped outside onto the porch before dialing. Cold air. Steady breathing. A receptionist transferred me to an estate attorney named Daniel Kessler. Mr. Whitmore passed away 3 months ago, he explained. Your mother was listed as a beneficiary decades ago. Since she predeceased Ms. Whitmore, her share passes to you. I didn't even know she existed, I admitted. That's common in extended family estates. How much are we talking about? Ask carefully. Estimated estate value is between $1.8 and $2.3 million. The world went quiet. And my share? Roughly 20%, pending final asset liquidation. 20%. That could mean 300,000, maybe more. My grip tightened on the phone. After months of fighting for survival. Now this. That evening I sat Dad and Renee down. I got a letter from an estate attorney. I began. Renee looked immediately suspicious. Dad looked confused. I handed them the copy. Dad read slowly. Renee leaned in. Silence stretched. This is real? Dad asked. I verified the probate case number. Renee's eyes flickered with something I hadn't seen in a while. Oh. For the first time since Mom died, the house didn't feel tense. Felt lighter. We weren't saved yet. Probate takes time. Month. Sometimes longer. But just knowing there might be a financial cushion changed something inside all of us. Dad leaned back in his chair. She never talked about this aunt, he murmured. I don't think she wanted help, I said quietly. Not when she was sick. Renee nodded slowly. Your mom was proud. She was. News travels fast in property circles. Especially when probate filings are public record. 3 days later my phone rang again. Holbrook. I hear congratulations may be in order, he said smoothly. I didn't answer the bait. What do you want? A revised settlement discussion. Course. If they thought I'd soon have cash, they'd try to leverage that. The agreement is signed, I replied. Agreements can be renegotiated. Not this one. Silence. Then a quieter tone. You're learning quickly. I had good teachers, I said. And I meant that in the strangest way. Because every threat had trained me. Later that night, Renee knocked on my bedroom door. Can we talk? He nodded. She sat on the edge of the desk chair, looking uncertain. I owe you something, she said. For the rent? Asked lightly. She winced. For everything. Silence filled the room. When I married your dad, I thought I was stepping into a ready-made life, she admitted. But your mom's presence was everywhere. I felt invisible. You tried to make space for yourself, I said. Yes. But I did it wrong. She swallowed. Charging you rent. Pushing you out. It wasn't about money. It was about control. That word again. Control had nearly destroyed us. I'm sorry, she said. No excuses. No justifications. Just that. For the first time I believed her. Weeks turned into months. The estate attorney sent updates. Assets included. A Chicago townhouse. Investment accounts. Art and antiques. Cash reserves. Debts and taxes had to be settled first. Then distributions. The estimate adjusted slightly lower after fees. Projected share. Approximately $365,000. Enough to pay off the settlement. Reduce the mortgage. Create savings. Or walk away entirely. Dad asked it one evening while we were reviewing settlement payment schedules. If that money comes through, do you still want to stay co-owner? Question hung heavy. I hadn't thought about it that way. This house had been my battlefield, my training ground. But was it my future? I don't know, I admitted. Renee looked nervous. You're not leaving because of us, are you? No, I said honestly. If I leave, it'll be because I choose to. And that was different from being pushed out. The probate hearing. 6 months later, I flew to Chicago for the final. Sitting in that courtroom, I felt small again. Not like the negotiator. Not like the protector. Just a son whose mother had a history he never knew. When the judge finalized distribution, it felt surreal. It was official. The inheritance would transfer within 30 days. As I walked outside into the cold Chicago air, my phone buzzed. Well, he asked. It's real, I said quietly. He exhaled, long and deep. I'm proud of you, son. Not because of the money. Because of everything that came before it. Back home, I stood in the kitchen, the same place where I had once signed a rental agreement. I thought about the journey. Tenant, owner, legal fighter, debt negotiator, beneficiary. The house was no longer under threat. The lien would be cleared soon. The mortgage could be cut in half. But I had changed. And so had the house. The question now wasn't, can we save it? The question was, do I still need it? The money hit my account on a Tuesday morning. $368,412.73. After taxes. After probate fees. After attorney costs. I stared at the number for a long time. Months ago, I had been calculating grocery money to avoid touching the wrong juice carton. Now I had more money than my father had ever seen at one time. It didn't feel exciting. Felt heavy. The first thing I did wasn't flashy. I paid the settlement. In full. No installments. No interest dragging behind us. Then I paid down half the mortgage principal. Dad stared at the updated loan statement like it was written in another language. We could breathe now, he whispered. Renee actually cried. Not dramatic tears. Relieved ones. For the first time since my mom died, the house wasn't suffocating under debt. Stood clean. Stable. 2 weeks later, the black SUV returned. Holbrook stepped out again, same polished confidence. But something was different this time. He wasn't circling prey. He was calculating opportunity. I hear the lien has been satisfied, he said. Yes. And the mortgage significantly reduced. Yes. He smiled slightly. You've increased the property's leverage value. I'm not selling, I replied calmly. I didn't come to buy, he said. That caught me off guard. I came to offer partnership. We sat at the dining table, the same table where I once signed a rental contract. Holbrook placed a folder in front of me. Your neighborhood is about to be rezoned for mixed-use development, he said. Property values will spike within 3 to 5 years. How do you know? Yes. He smiled faintly. Research. Course. He pointed to a highlighted section in the documents. If you hold the property, renovate strategically, and convert part of it legally, you could double its value. My heart started beating faster. You're suggesting development. I'm suggesting vision. Dad looked overwhelmed. Renee looked cautious. I looked curious. That night, I walked through every room of the house. The hallway where my mom's pictures hung. The kitchen where Renee once charged me rent. The basement that nearly collapsed. The front porch where I made phone calls that changed our future. This house had tested me, trained me, forced me to grow. But it wasn't just history anymore. It was potential. I don't want to lose the house, Dad said quietly. We're not losing it, I replied. But development changes things. So does staying stuck, I said gently. He sighed. I was afraid of change after your mom died. That's why I made bad decisions. I just wanted things to stay steady. I know. And you, he asked. What do you want? Thought carefully. I want ownership to mean something bigger than survival. I didn't partner blindly. I negotiated. Equity terms. Decision control. Exit clauses. I had learned too much to trust without structure. In the end, we agreed to a limited partnership. The house remains in my name and Dad's. We refinance strategically at low interest. Add a permitted rental suite in the basement. Prepare for future zoning expansion. This time, no hidden loans. No forged signatures. Everything transparent. Everything documented. Holbrook respected that. You're not the same kid I met, he said. No, I replied. I'm not. The construction plans required temporary relocation for 6 weeks. Renee stood in the living room looking around. I almost drove you out of this house, she said softly. But you didn't, I replied. She smiled faintly. You made me earn my place here too. We both laughed lightly. Not enemies. Not even opponents anymore. Just people who survived the same storm. The basement was transformed legally this time. Licensed contractors. Permits displayed. Inspections passed. It became a small rental unit. Clean, safe, profitable. The irony wasn't lost on me. The house that once charged me rent now generated income. And I controlled it. One evening months later, I stood alone on the porch. The neighborhood buzzed with signs of upcoming development. New cafes opening. Sidewalk repairs. Construction permits posted down the street. Maple Drive was changing. And so was I. I thought about the boy who signed a rental agreement in his own home. Angry. Powerless. Confused. If I could speak to him now, I'd say, you weren't paying rent. You were paying tuition. Tuition for lessons in ownership. In boundaries. In resilience. In negotiation. The house didn't break me. Built me. Dad stepped onto the porch beside me. Feels different now, he said. It is, I replied. He placed a hand on my shoulder. Your mom would be proud. For the first time. That didn't hurt. Felt steady. True. And as the sun dipped behind the houses on Maple Drive, I realized something simple. Home isn't the place that charges you. It's the place that shapes you.